Hi everyone, it's Karen from Karen's Quilts, Crows and Cardinals blog and Redbird Quilt Co. Here for another installment of our 2016 free motion quilt along. We're doing some beginning free motion quilting on our domestic machines. We're using the lovely Lou's Balloons growth chart panel by World of Susie B. The artist is Susie Bleasby. What we're finding with this great panel is it gives us an awesome way to practice our free motion quilting, learn free motion quilting without a lot of investment. We've put a couple simple borders on it. We're using a couple layers of batting. We've invested in some awesome Aurifil thread. The Quilter's Dream wool batting is my favorite. We're just moving right along and we're on the final border steps of this great panel. So I'm so glad you've joined me. I just want to cover tonight a couple of quick things about the borders, and then I'll be sure to refer back to the blog post so that we can get in sync about those giveaways and about ways to do the hanging sleeve and that kind of information. But before I do that, let's talk about these final three borders. Now on this tiny little black sashing border that we did up front, I used Aurifil 12 weight thread on that very early on and stitched with my walking foot all the way around the perimeter of the panel in order to stabilize things. If you did that too, then fantastic. What I did since then though is I went ahead and I put yet another set of stitching around the inside of that same black border. That's border number 1. I used Aurifil 12 weight in the top, Aurifil 50 weight in the bobbin, the same color that we used for the top, and I used a very large needle. I believe it was like 116 needle. Does that sound right? A very large needle. You may need 100 or 110 size needle, and put your stitch length to a large stitch length like 3.5 or even larger, so that you're not doing tiny stitches, but you're doing like a top stitch stitch. So I went with that same layout and did the same thing out in the border number 2. I used Aurifil 12 weight thread, color 2105, which was on our supply list, and it's a beautiful color. I believe it's called Champagne, and I, with my walking foot, went around all of border number 2. Now, I realize some of you that are learning to free motion quilt may want to just free motion quilt that little border number 2. So tonight we're going to talk about a couple of different options for how to do that, and then I'm also going to tell you my plan for stitching border number 3. Okay, are you all ready? I'm going to move this out of the way, and we're going to talk a little bit about border number 2 and number 3. I've got my handy dandy little whiteboard out. A lot of you have asked about my whiteboard. It's called Go Right, and I'm not quite sure where I picked it up, but it was at some chain store. Check any place that has these types of supplies. Just check locally. I'm sure you can probably find it online if you want to as well, but it's called Go Right. It's got several pages of dry erase marking sheets in it. I use it to practice. I use it to teach. I take it with me in every workshop that I do. I love it. So hopefully you can find one for yourself, and if not, a pencil and a paper works just fine. So here we are. Here's some ideas for you for filling in border number 2, which is our yellow border. It's about an inch and a quarter or so wide. So I've got some guidelines on here. I've got some ideas down for you, and remember, these are just some ideas. There are so many different ways of doing this quilting, but I thought I would share some of my favorites and some that are really not hard to do. Okay, so the first one to the far left here is a pebble and a pebble, and you can use the ditch to travel, or you can just travel in kind of a ribbon format down the left hand side. But the way it works out is you stitch a pebble, then a larger one, and then you stitch a smaller one in center, and then you can travel either in the ditch or outside of the ditch. You can kind of make a little ribbon down here down the left side. Do a large pebble and a small pebble. Travel, large pebble, small pebble. Travel, large, small. You get the idea. And you can do that all the way down and actually around the corner at the bottom. At the bottom you can travel, large pebble, small pebble, travel and actually turn the corner and continue along that same path. Okay, that's just an idea that kind of just I really hadn't thought of that ahead of time, but you do need to turn the corner. If you don't want to turn the corner while you're moving, that because you can actually end that and start a whole different line going down the small borders on your panel. So that's just one idea. Let me just draw it again for you. I'm going to do a large pebble. Remember, you're going to travel to get yourself hooked up for the small one. Go down the side, large pebble, small, down the side, large, small, and you can kind of position these smaller pebbles anywhere you want inside of the larger pebble. Do what's comfortable for you, but get your pen and paper out and practice it, so that you know, your head has it in your brain how it is that you're going to stitch it when you finally get a chance to sit down and stitch it. All right, so that's option number one. Option number two, here it's our little swirly kind of ram's head idea that we did in our green balloon, just all over again. So the idea is to make a little swirl, come out of the swirl, make a V and go to the opposite direction into a new swirl. Come out of that swirl, stop, and go in a different direction. Make a little V. Here's our little V here. Go in a different direction. Come out of it, stop. Now you're going to make a V going this direction. And you're going to follow that same thing all the way down the sashing. I love this because it gives great texture. You don't have to be exact about it. It's very flexible as far as size goes. I really love that motif. So let me just do it by hand here for you. So you're going to make a swirl, come out of it, stop, and go the opposite direction. You're making a little V when you come out of it and stop. Make a swirl, come out of it, stop. It's almost like a little ram's head inside of that V. So this is the idea with this one. I hope you can see that okay. It's really, really flexible motif. I love that motif. So that's option number two. Option number three is kind of a sort of a pearl, feather, paisley type of an idea with a little swirl embedded in it. And this is also a very flexible motif. I love this one. I put it on a feather sampler that I made a little while ago, and it's great, great motif. So the idea is to stitch up a pearl, come down one side of the pearl, and fall into a swirl. Come out of that swirl and do another pearl. Oh my goodness, am I going to be able to say that? Go down the opposite side of that one from what you did the first one and come into a little swirl. Come out of there, make a new pebble, or I'm sorry, pearl. Go down the opposite direction. Let's see, we went down the left side the last time, so let's go down the right side. This one's a little bit boo-booed, but let's see. All right, so do you get the idea? Let me do it for you again. Make a pearl, come out of it, make a swirl. Go down and make another pearl. Now the last time I went down the right, so I'm going to go down the left, come out of it into another swirl. Make a pearl. I see I went down the left, so I'm going to go down the right and make a swirl. You get the idea. It doesn't matter which direction you make your pearl, just make your swirls go opposite direction. And it doesn't matter if you exactly hug this side or not. You can make that travel away from the little pearl if you want to. Practice this one a few times on paper. I love this design. It's a really, really flexible design. It works out really well. So let me do it again. You do a little pearl, you travel and make a swirl. Now I want to go down the opposite direction this next time because I don't want it to look the same. I want it to kind of look different on each time I create it. And it doesn't matter which direction you stitch your pearl, but when you come out of that pearl, go the opposite way so that your swirl can hook in the other direction. Is that helpful? I hope that's helpful to you. As I've said 100 times, there's no right or wrong though. Get a piece of paper out, practice what feels good to you, do it over and over, make it what looks good to your eye, and use that in your stitching. And one great thing about almost everything we have on this paper is that we've done some variation of these inside of the quilt top, and I love doing that. I like taking what I did inside a quilt top and kind of using a similar motif on the outside of the quilt top, because it just allows the motif to kind of grow with the quilt. It's inside and it's in the border, and it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but something that complements it. And all these motifs that we have here, none of them are too awful tiny. shiny. So that's going to kind of go along with our density idea. So let me just hurry right along here. The other option is you can still stitch in the top stitching that I did with the Aurifil 12 weight. I've been sharing a lot on Facebook lately, some beautiful channelings from some really talented quilters, ladies and men that I highly admire. So this is one chance that you can have to do some channel stitching. You can leave that top stitching that we did in there with the Aurifil 12 weight, and inside of it you could go ahead and add pebbles. So remember, when I make my pebbles, I like to make a full circle, come out of it, position myself to where I'm going to go next, and then build my next purl. A full circle, travel, build my next purl. A full circle, travel, build my next purl. So I love to make my circles that way, as opposed to doing kind of half of a circle all the way down and then the other half all the way up. I just find if I travel around a full circle, it allows me to get in the groove and allows my pebbles to become rounded. So, but again, stitch it and draw it for yourself so that you're sure what works best for you. A pebble all the way around, and so you're backtracking, or you're sneaking around, or you're traveling. It's referred to a lot of different ways, but make a full circle, travel to where you want your next circle, and make a new one. So that's another option. You can do this with or without that channeling, which is basically just stitching on either side, kind of giving yourself a channel to lay those pebbles into. Okay, so those are our 4 options for our narrow border number 2. Let me jump right forward to what I plan on doing for border number 3, which is our beautiful green border that we have. I've got kind of pseudo lines here that show about the width that we're working with, but this is my really high-tech idea that I have for the outside border. I'm basically just going to echo again those pebbles that we did inside and put them on the outside border. I don't want to do anything that's too dense. I don't want to go against the beautiful little dots that are inside of that loose balloons green. It's a beautiful fabric already. There's no sense to complicate it. And again, we're beginners, so there's really no sense in doing anything fancy. If you like to stipple, go ahead and stipple or meander. To be honest, and if you've had any of my workshops, you'll hear me say, I'm not all that great at stippling. I really need to practice that on paper a little more, or on my whiteboard. But anyhow, I should listen to my own practice what I preach, right? So my idea here is to just take this is our outside border. It's our 3rd border. Over here in the right is our batting. We can use this area over here in the right to travel if we need to. So that's something to consider. But I'm just going to go right up against that 2nd border. I'm going to make a pebble, and I'm going to make a varying size pebbles. Now, one thing to point out is I might want to butt my pebbles right up against that seam, so you may have to do some backtracking, but that's okay. It's really not a big deal. If you get a spot where you have a gap like this, either fill it with another pebble or just ignore it. It doesn't really matter. But remember, out here we have our batting, so we can use this area out here to kind of travel if we want to. And when we put our binding on, we're going to be cutting off some of our pebbles, and we're not going to worry about that this time, because when we square up our loose balloon growth chart panel, we may have to square it up depending on the density of our quilting and how that went. We may have a little bit less border in some areas than other, so I'm not going to fuss over too much how anything that I do out here on the right hand edge. It may get chopped off. When we're doing more intermediate quilting training, then we'll worry about taking that into account. But this time around, let's just get some big old fat pebbles in there and get this border done, quilted, not too dense, and be happy with what we've created. We've come a long way since we started. So this is my idea on this, and remember, again, we've got that outside edge that we can travel onto. If we want to travel from one spot to another, we can come out here and kind of travel and fill in from there. So that is my idea for for the final border or border number 3. Now I don't want to run out of time, but I do want to tell you I'm excited about everything we've done. I hope it's been helpful for you. I'd love to hear your feedback either on Facebook or on my blog. Send me an email if you like. You can email redbirdquiltco@gmail.com or Karen@redbirdquiltco. I'd love to hear you. I'm going to have all the details for the giveaway and also a hanging sleeve and binding. Kind of some tutorials, or pointing you to tutorials for things out on my blog. So get over to that blog post and get all the details there. We've got Aurifil thread to give away, Quilter's Dream batting to give away, Creekside Fabrics who sponsored a gift certificate, Quilty Pleasures who sponsored a gift certificate, So It Is who's giving us a beautiful loose balloon panel and some fabric to go along with that, and then Susie B is also throwing in some fabric as well. So we've got some great giveaways. I don't want you to miss out on that, but you need to get your stitching done so you can be eligible for that giveaway. So here we are. I'm going to sign off for tonight. Have a great one. Thanks for joining me. Please leave me any questions. If you need me to do more videos, let me know. I'd be happy to try to fit them in. I've got a crazy schedule coming up, but it's so much fun. It's so much fun to share. I appreciate you. Talk to you soon.